As I stood on the stage exchanging the engagement contract with Jasper Hale, I heard the snickers from the guests below. Eleanor Voss really hit the jackpot. If her sister hadn't gotten sick, this marriage would never have fallen to her. Exactly. Look at her. Acting like she's won the lottery. Does Jasper even want to be with her? I glanced at the women making the remarks. Sure enough, it was those same young ladies from the old families who'd been trampling all over me ever since the Voss family started its slow decline. The large screen above the stage flickered, and suddenly a video began playing. No blur, no censorship. Then came the voices of Jasper Hale and my illegitimate half-sister. Jasper. It's just my bad luck. I can't be your bride. After tonight, let's pretend we're strangers. Okay. Then Jasper's voice, thick with fake anguish. I won't let you talk about yourself like that. You're the woman I love. What followed was a string of obscene sounds that made the entire room erupt in chaos. I didn't even flinch. I just looked straight to the back row, where Laya Voss was staring at me with a sickly sweet smile, her eyes blazing with unmistakable defiance. I'd known she'd try to ruin my engagement party, but I never thought she'd go this far, willing to let hundreds of people see her most humiliating moment. Laya had been waiting to see me break down screaming. Instead, I let out a cold laugh, raised an eyebrow, and looked directly at Jasper standing opposite me. Jasper Hale, does marrying me make you that miserable? Before he could open his mouth, I ripped the engagement contract in two and threw the pieces in his face. Before the guests could even process what had happened, I hiked up my dress, marched down the stage, grabbed the two gossiping women in the front row by their hair, and slapped them hard across the face once each. Then I turned on my heel and walked out, leaving the entire room stunned. My best friend Chloe Bennett had her car idling right outside the ballroom. I jumped in, kicked off my painful heels, and planted my bare feet on the carpet, just as the Voss family came running out the door. Chloe slammed on the gas. Her powerful sports car peeled out, leaving them choking on exhaust fumes. Sitting in the car, I typed replies to my assistant while sending footage of the engagement party disaster to my network of clickbait accounts. 5 minutes later, a 1 million follower account broke the story. Billionaire illegitimate daughter leaks sex tape at sister's engagement party. Laya Voss viral video. Shameless illegitimate daughter ruins engagement party. As I watched the views and comments skyrocket, a flicker of satisfaction crossed my face. Now the Hale family had no choice but to marry Laya. And once Jasper Hale married Laya Voss, their downfall would begin. The Voss family couldn't reach me, and in their panic, they stormed over to the Hales to argue. The engagement party ended in total chaos thanks to the sex tape. Victoria Hale, who'd orchestrated the entire marriage alliance, turned livid, slammed her wine glass on the table, and stormed out. Even Richard Hale, who was normally the most easygoing man in the room, dropped his smile and left without a word. Jasper stood frozen on the stage, the male lead of the viral video, staring down at the torn pieces of the engagement contract at his feet. No one in the room felt sorry for him. The guests watched the man who'd cheated on his fiancée with her own sister, and even if they couldn't say it out loud because of the Hale family's status, their eyes were filled with schadenfreude. The MC tried to smooth things over, but the farce ended abruptly. My mole inside Voss Enterprises told me that Laya had gotten into Jasper's car right after the party. I nodded. She'd probably be crying and manipulating him into feeling sorry for her again. Chloe let out a long sigh, watching me work furiously even as we fled the scene. This is wild. Your fiancé just cheated on you with your half-sister, and you're over here running a PR campaign. I scoffed, never taking my eyes off my phone. If you'd seen the video, you'd understand why I'm so calm. Eleanor Voss doesn't waste her time on anything smaller than a MacBook. Chloe froze for a second, then burst out laughing so hard she banged on the steering wheel. A small smile tugged at my lips as I continued assigning tasks to my assistant. When we got back to Chloe's apartment, my father Theodore finally called. I put him on speakerphone, and his furious voice boomed through the room. Eleanor Voss, what the hell were you thinking running off like that? I was typing an email on my laptop, and a small smile played on my lips. You have the nerve to yell at me. Who's the one who ruined this engagement party? Your precious illegitimate daughter. She humiliated herself by leaking that video just to steal her sister's fiancé. What did you always say should happen to girls who act like that? I nodded, feigning innocence. If I remember correctly. You said they should be beaten half to death and locked in the basement with the dogs. I could hear his breathing growing heavy on the other end. Before he could explode, I spoke softly, my voice cold as ice. Instead of yelling at me, you should be figuring out how to make Jasper marry your perfect daughter. After all, it's not easy to convince old money families to accept a woman with no shame. I hung up immediately and went back to my emails, completely unfazed. From what I remembered, the Voss family had made their fortune in clothing. They'd ridden the wave of economic boom to become one of the top fabric merchants in New York City. At their peak, even the biggest A-list stars wore Voss designs on stage. But after my grandfather and my mother Clara died, my father took over, and the family business began a rapid decline. It was no surprise Theodore only cared about drinking, gambling, and women. His second wife was nothing but a beautiful, airhead secretary with barely a community college degree. She'd gotten pregnant with Lila first, then married Theodore, and settled comfortably into the role of Mrs. Voss. Meanwhile, I'd been sent to study in Europe, and I'd stayed away from the family business for almost 10 years. I'd only been called back recently for this marriage alliance. The Hales had their eyes on the few remaining patents Voss Enterprises still held, and they'd wanted the marriage to get something for nothing. But Victoria Hale was proud, and she'd looked down on the flashy, shallow Lila. She'd specifically asked for me, so when the engagement fell apart, and her own son ran off with that little tramp Lila, Victoria was absolutely furious. The Hale family's bodyguards dragged both Jasper and Lila back to the mansion immediately. Jasper knelt on the floor, staring up at his mother's unreadable face. He swallowed hard and spoke loudly. Mother, it's too late to go back now. Please let me marry Lila. Victoria glanced at Lila, who was kneeling beside him with her mouth taped shut. She didn't miss the flash of triumph in Lila's eyes. When Victoria said nothing, Jasper thought she was going to agree, and he pushed his luck. I know what you and father want. They're both Voss daughters. What difference does it make who I marry? Besides, Lila grew up in the Voss household. She's way more refined than Eleanor. Before he could finish, Victoria threw a scalding teacup straight at his face. Victoria had been disappointed in Jasper before, but now she looked at him like he was already dead. She let out a cold laugh. Bullshit. You think I agreed to this marriage for their worthless patents? I'll tell you the truth, I only did it for Eleanor Voss. Eleanor built her own design brand in Europe when she was 19. Her brand makes more money than all of Voss Enterprises' remaining clothing lines combined. If you weren't such a useless failure who loses money on everything he touches, I wouldn't have been desperate to find a wife who could actually make us money. She glared at Lila, who was cowering behind Jasper, and scoffed. And you say this little tramp is refined? Would a refined woman leak a sex tape with her sister's fiancé at her sister's engagement party? Jasper's head shot up, panic in his eyes. Mother, Lila didn't do this. It was all Eleanor. She set us up. Before he could finish, Victoria slapped him so hard his head snapped to the side. Say one more word, and you and that shameless little whore behind you can both get out of this house. Victoria took a deep breath, and when she looked at Jasper again, her eyes were filled with nothing but disappointment. I'm giving you 3 days. If you still refuse to marry Eleanor, don't bother coming back to the Hale mansion. A look of conflict crossed Jasper's face. Before he could speak, the servants grabbed him and dragged him down to the basement. Lila was thrown out of the house immediately. The paparazzi camped outside the Hale mansion had captured photos of Lila being thrown out, and they'd sold us a dramatic play-by-play of what had happened inside. Chloe's family owned one of the biggest media companies in the country, so before the Voss family could even contact the paparazzi to buy the photos, we'd already sent them to our clickbait accounts and got them trending on X. I did all this without a single ounce of guilt. The first rule of surviving in high society is never show mercy to anyone who tries to take what's yours, especially someone like Lila, who'd spent her whole life positioning herself as the Voss family heir. If I wanted to take back Voss Enterprises, I had to destroy her reputation completely. Before I came back to New York, the Voss family had truly been grooming Lila to take over the business. When I'd been forced to leave the country after that secretary and her daughter took over, the Voss family had still been one of the wealthiest in the city. Who would have thought that in just a few years they'd fallen this far? But even a fallen giant has more clout than a nobody. Voss Enterprises still held dozens of valuable patents, but Lila, the supposed heir to the Voss fortune, had no interest in learning how to run a company. Instead, she'd faked a title as a heritage artisan and become an influencer. Even with all her fancy packaging, her lack of education and shallow knowledge constantly showed through. More than one master luxury silk brocade artisan had called her out online for pretending to know what she was talking about and exploiting traditional culture for clout. Recently, she'd even started selling products on live streams under her heritage artisan title, passing off cheap machine-embroidered fabric as handcrafted luxury silk brocade to make a quick buck. She'd given the entire industry a terrible name. Now Lila was a controversial figure online, half-loved, half-hated, and no one really trusted anything she said. I felt a little sorry for her, but mostly I was relieved. The dumber my enemy was, the easier it would be to take back Voss Enterprises. In the end, Jasper chose Lila. 3 days later, the Hale family announced that they would still be marrying into the Voss family, but this time, it would be Lila, not Eleanor. I knew exactly what Lila was thinking. She believed that since Jasper was the Hale family's only son, no matter what he did, he'd always be the heir. Once the scandal died down, she'd apologize to Victoria and Richard, and everything would be fine. She'd still be the future Mrs. Hale, the lady of the house. And it wasn't just Lila. Jasper thought the same thing, but I had to laugh. Victoria and Richard Hale were seasoned business veterans who'd fought their way to the top. They could see right through Lila's little schemes. The only reason they'd agreed to the marriage was because they no longer cared. It looked like the Hale family was going to have a new heir. I wondered if Jasper was ready to be thrown away. To save face, the Hales paid a fortune to buy up all copies of Lila and Jasper's sex tape. It made Chloe's clickbait accounts a huge profit. A few weeks later, Lila showed up at my design studio with an invitation. She put on her sweetest voice and asked me to come to her engagement party. She was wearing a dress from one of the Hale family's clothing brands, and she handed me the invitation with a fake smile. My engagement party to Jasper is on the 10th of next month, and I really want you to be there, sister. Even though you've been disowned by the Voss family, we're still blood. There's no need to be so cold. Jasper and I have been through so much to be together. Of course I want my big sister's blessing. She batted her eyelashes, putting on her most innocent act, like I'd be the unreasonable one if I refused. But I had no intention of giving her what she wanted. I sat back in my CEO chair, stared at the card, and let out a cold laugh. I picked up the invitation between 2 fingers, slowly dropped it into the trash can, and looked her up and down. Who knew all you had to do to marry into a billionaire family was take off your clothes? You made way more money than the girls who strip for a living. Lila's face turned red, then white. Before she could speak, I added, a smirk playing on my lips. My colleagues in London were talking about you the other day. They said you had a great body and asked how much you charged per night. Who came up with this brilliant idea for you? Your community college dropout mother. When she saw the schadenfreude on my face, Lila finally snapped. She dropped her perfect lady act, pointed a finger in my face, and screamed, Eleanor Voss, don't you dare push your luck. I only invited you because I felt sorry for you. You're a nobody who got kicked out of New York like a stray dog, and you dare refuse me. I'm going to be the future Mrs. Hale. Who the hell do you think you are? You ungrateful little bitch. You think you're so special. She lunged at me, trying to slap me, but I caught her wrist easily and threw her to the floor. I uncrossed my legs and pressed the pointed toe of my stiletto into the hand she'd put on the carpet to break her fall. I pressed down slowly, watching as she screamed in agony and blood seeped into the carpet. Then I leaned down slowly, so our eyes were level, and spoke in a low, dangerous voice. Don't think that just because I was gone for 10 years, you're the Voss family heir. As long as I'm alive, I will keep you under my boot. Forever. You will never get ahead of me. And you think marrying into the Hale family makes you some kind of Ragstorch's princess? We'll see about that. I stood up straight and kicked her hard in the side. Get out of my office. You trash. On the day of Lila and Jasper's engagement party, neither Victoria nor Richard Hale showed up. Only a few small-time media outlets covered the event. It was nothing compared to the grand party I'd been supposed to have. Chloe told me that Lila had looked miserable on stage. All her usual arrogance gone. I smiled at the messages on my phone and teased, "Aren't you going to send her a wedding present?" Then I turned off my phone and looked up at the interviewer. She frowned at my resume for a long moment before speaking. "Ms. Voss, with all due respect, you have your own successful brand in Europe, and your designs are exceptional. There's no reason for you to come work for Thorn Group. Why did you choose us?" I looked up at her and smiled. "I just think my design aesthetic is a perfect fit for your brand. That's all." I smiled back at her, and after a moment, she glanced down at her phone, then looked up with a smile. "Congratulations, Ms. Voss. Welcome to the team." I stood up and shook her hand, a smile on my face. After the pleasantries, the company sent a car to take me back to my apartment. As I read the messages Chloe had sent me about Lila, my smile faded. To save face for their future daughter-in-law, the Hales had paid a fortune to take down all the trending topics about Lila and the Voss family, desperate to make sure their precious daughter married into the Hale family. Had fired their previous brand ambassador and made Lila the new face of Voss Enterprises. Seeing Lila's sweet smile on billboards all over the city, you'd think I was the one who'd lost everything. I looked down, deleted all the messages about Lila one by one, and sent a quick text. "I'm in. It's your turn now, boss." I sighed. I'd have to let Lila have her moment in the sun a little longer. But fireworks always burn out eventually, and Lila would be no different. After the interview, I merged my New York design studio into Thorn Group. I was put in charge of designing the fall collection for their most popular heritage-inspired classic brand. I had 2 reasons for not going it alone. First, I didn't have deep roots in New York yet, not like the Voss family, who'd been here for generations. Aligning my studio with the powerful Thorn Group would give me the leverage I needed to fight Lila. The second reason was even simpler. Killian Thorne, the founder of Thorn Group and my old college classmate, was the Hale family's long-lost biological son. The DNA test results had come back on the exact day of my engagement party to Jasper. Victoria had never expected to find her son after all these years, and when she saw how successful he'd become on his own, she'd completely forgotten about her adopted son Jasper. When Lila heard that I'd merged my studio into Thorn Group, she'd scoffed. She'd even sent me a congratulatory gift made with Voss Enterprises exclusive fabric, as if to say no matter what I did, Voss would always be hers. I didn't care. Killian had already come to me and told me that our brand's fall launch date was the exact same as Lila's brand's launch. If our brand outsold Lila's, Thorn Group would increase their investment in my team, giving me the resources I needed to take over Voss Enterprises in one fell swoop. In return, Killian wanted 10 of Voss Enterprises shares and for me to pretend to be his fiancé, to help him gain support for taking over Hale Corporation. After all, employees can leave, but a fiancé is a sign of commitment. And my long-running success in Europe had already proven that I was a force to be reckoned with in the fashion industry. A talented designer with a sharp business sense was exactly what a mid-tier fashion group like Hale Corporation needed. Once I proved myself in New York, Killian and I would be an unstoppable team. Taking down a spoiled rich kid like Jasper and a paper tiger like Lila would be child's play. At Thorn Group, We poured most of our budget into research and development and high-quality fabrics. So while Lila was spending millions paying influencers to promote her brand, my team and I were working with fabric suppliers and manufacturers to perfect our collection. Killian didn't just sit back and watch me work. He pulled me in to film a promotional video that we released across all major platforms. The results were incredible. My international reputation, combined with our brand's high-quality materials and impeccable tailoring, resonated perfectly with our target audience. Our authentic marketing approach completely overshadowed Lila's influencer campaign, and we quickly became one of the top trending topics on X. A legendary heritage brand and a world-renowned designer come together to create timeless elegance for the modern professional woman. That tagline, with its subtle sense of timelessness, struck a chord with millions of people online. According to Killian's mole inside Voss Enterprises, Lila had thrown a fit when she saw our video outshining hers, smashing half the furniture in her office. A week later, we attended a Hale Corporation gala. Lila barely looked at me. Killian and I had been invited as his fiancé, and Thorn Group was one of the most powerful companies in New York. So under Victoria's half-hearted threat, Lila and Jasper reluctantly came over to toast us. I looked at the haggard Lila with a smirk and spoke slowly. Looks like life in the Hale household isn't treating you well. Sister, you've aged so much in just 2 months. Lila's face froze. I'd hit a nerve. I smiled to myself as she stood there silent. It was true, Lila's position in the Hale family was precarious at best. Even though Jasper and Lila were engaged and the sex tape scandal had been swept under the rug, Jasper's rivals in high society still brought it up constantly to humiliate him. He couldn't hold his head up anywhere. In their eyes, it was fine to fool around with any woman you wanted, but the woman you married had to be a proper lady from a good family. So everyone laughed at Jasper for his stupid mistake. When Jasper lost face in public, he took it out on Lila when they got home. To make matters worse, Voss Enterprises was having cash flow problems, and Lila had gone way over budget on her fall collections marketing campaign. The Voss family was starting to question her leadership. Lila was caught between a rock and a hard place, and it was a stark contrast to me, who was now the most talked about designer in the country. I slipped my arm through Killian's and smiled sweetly at Lila. Oh, and by the way, sister, you still owe me a blessing for finding such a wonderful fiancé. Killian played along, giving Lila and Jasper a polite smile. Jasper's face turned dark with anger. Killian had come from nothing and built an empire on his own, rising to the top of Los Angeles's high society. He was 1,000 times more impressive than the spoiled, useless Jasper. Jasper still had no idea that Killian was his biological brother, but he was intimidated by Killian's power. He gritted his teeth and congratulated me. I smiled and made a few more snide comments to Lila, then walked away arm in arm with Killian. In September, our fall collection launched. It included versatile basics as well as bold, innovative designs. We'd priced the collection affordably, targeting young professional women just starting their careers. Our launch date was the exact same as Lila's. Lila wasn't stupid. She paid a fortune to hire an A-list actress as her brand ambassador, and for the first few days, her collection was outselling ours. But a week later, the first wave of angry customers started posting online. Lila had spent so much on marketing that she'd cut corners on fabric quality and production standards. People were furious that a 100 tank top was covered in loose threads. The stitching was nothing like the photos on the website, and the colors were completely different. Then a popular influencer posted a video pointing out that Lila's clothes ran absurdly small. Her largest size was a medium, and she'd completely ignored plus-size customers. Within hours, Lila's X account was flooded with complaints. She had over 100,000 comments, and not a single one was defending her. Lila had a complete public meltdown. She logged on in the middle of the night and made a series of snide comments to her fans. These are standard sizes, okay? If you can't fit into them, maybe you should ask yourself if you've gained weight. I'm just saying fat people don't deserve to wear my clothes. Even I was shocked when I read that. I couldn't believe how stupid Lila was. But then again, It made sense. She'd had everything handed to her whole life. She and her mother had ruled the Voss household with no one to stop them. And I'd been thousands of miles away in Europe. A spoiled brat like her had never been criticized like this before. Of course she'd lose her mind. I sent Killian a screenshot of Lila's rant. And he texted back saying he'd already seen it. He told his PR team to boost the posts criticizing Lila. And within hours, the entire internet was talking about how terrible she was. That's when we launched our second marketing campaign. I'd taken a completely different approach. Instead of hiring only tall, thin, perfect models, I'd cast real women of all shapes, sizes, and backgrounds to try on our clothes and give their honest opinions. Women of every height, weight, and skin color sat together and gave me, the brand's creative director, their honest feedback. I used their input to make final adjustments to the collection. We offered sizes from XXS to 5XL, so every woman could find something that fit her perfectly. When the campaign video dropped, people were blown away by how genuine and thoughtful our brand was. The comments poured in. Eleanor seems so genuine, and the clothes look amazing quality. I bought clothes from both Eleanor and Lila. I returned all of Lila's, none of them fit right. Eleanor's clothes have such a great fit. They completely hide my stomach. Her coats are incredible. The stitching is perfect. And they're cheaper than Lila's. At our next team meeting, Killian projected those comments onto the whiteboard. My design team and I sat in the front row. Killian smiled at me and said, "This fall collection has broken all our sales records. Let's give a round of applause to our creative director, Eleanor Voss." He started clapping, and I stood up with a smile. When the quarterly sales numbers appeared on the screen, the other creative directors in the room gasped. "That's impossible. Their prices are so reasonable, they must have sold millions of units." I shook Killian's hand and thanked my team from the stage. Then Killian announced that every designer on my team would be getting shares in the brand. My assistant, who was sitting next to me, lit up with joy. Everyone loves a generous boss. While we were celebrating, the Voss household was in complete despair. Thanks to Lila's stupidity, most of her remaining fans had unfollowed and abandoned her. The return rate for her brand was astronomical, and the quarterly report was a disaster, combined with the millions she'd spent on marketing. Voss Enterprises had lost every last penny. Lila tried to ask Jasper for help, but she quickly found out that he could share joy but not hardship. He didn't have a single dollar to his name. All his cards were supplementary cards linked to Victoria's account. Once she cut him off, he was worthless, trapped on all sides. Lila hid away in her house like a turtle. After a huge fight with Jasper, he'd become even colder to her, and they'd stopped speaking to each entirely. Just when things couldn't get any worse, a woman showed up at Hale Corporation's headquarters and started screaming at the top of her lungs. She was a stripper from a local club, and she was pregnant. She said Jasper was the father and demanded he take responsibility. I heard about it from a post Chloe sent me. She said the woman had gone to Jasper first. He'd gotten her pregnant, but he'd only offered to pay for an abortion, nothing more. The woman had been willing to take the money and leave, but when Jasper refused to give her anything else, she'd snapped. She'd marched straight to Hale Corporation's headquarters and chosen the busiest time of day, right when everyone was leaving work, to make her scene. The story went viral, and the Hale family's reputation as respectable businessmen was ruined. Victoria was absolutely furious, and she was currently tearing Jasper a new one. I was scrolling through the drama online when Killian texted me, "Eleanor, we might have to go to New York earlier than planned. Pack your bags, we're leaving Los Angeles right now." I read his text, threw my things into a suitcase in 2 minutes flat, and met Killian at the airport. I couldn't believe it. Just a few months ago, I'd fled New York in disgrace. Now I was making my triumphant return. As I looked down at the New York City skyline from the plane, I closed my eyes and remembered the day my mother had been dying in the hospital. My mother was hooked up to a ventilator, but my father was in the next room making out with his secretary. 13-year-old Lila had kicked open the door and pushed me from behind. I'd hit my head on the sharp corner of the hospital bed, and blood had run down my face. Lila had stood over me, looking down her nose. So you're Eleanor Voss. My mom says she's pulling the plug on your mom tomorrow. From now on, I'm the Voss family's only daughter. You have 5 hours to pack your things and get out of my house. That's how I'd been kicked out of the only home I'd ever known. My uncle had arranged for me to study in Europe, and I'd spent my teenage years fighting against racism and building a life for myself in a foreign country. By the time I was in my 20s, I'd built a successful career and was finally ready to come back and get my revenge. This time, I wasn't just going to take back Voss Enterprises. I was going to make every single person who'd hurt me pay. My father, his mistress, and Lila. None of them would escape. Killian and I got off the plane and drove straight to the Hale mansion. The butler led us inside, and we found Jasper kneeling on the floor. He looked up when we walked in, and his eyes locked with mine. I was wearing a long black trench coat, and I looked completely different from the woman who'd run away months ago. Eleanor, what are you doing here? Jasper asked, disbelief written all over his face. I didn't say anything. I just stepped aside, revealing Killian standing behind me. Killian was also wearing a dark overcoat, and he gave Jasper a small smile from behind his gold-rimmed glasses. Jasper's eyes widened in shock, and he suddenly remembered the rumor that had been going around high society. People had been saying that the Hales were too smart and successful to have a son as useless as Jasper. What if they'd been switched at birth? What if Jasper wasn't really a Hale at all? Jasper had laughed at the rumor when he'd first heard it. Now it didn't seem so funny. Could it actually be true? He tried to study Killian's face, to see how much he looked like Richard Hale. But Victoria walked over and blocked his view. She smiled warmly at Killian and said, "Son, why did you take such a late flight?" Killian smiled back, his voice gentle. "I'm fine, Mother. It wasn't that bad." Victoria playfully hit Killian on the arm. "I know you men are tough, but I was worried about my future daughter-in-law." She linked her arm through mine and led Killian and me to the couch, right in front of Jasper. Jasper was too shocked to speak. I glanced over and saw Lila standing in the corner, her head bowed. But even though she was looking down, I could see the rage and jealousy on her face. A sarcastic smile tugged at my lips. I couldn't believe how low Lila's status was in the Hale household. She wasn't even allowed to sit down. She was treated like a servant. As soon as we arrived, Victoria focused all her attention on Killian and me. She even had the servants bring out one of my designs and gushed about how talented I was, looking at me with nothing but approval. Killian sat next to me, holding my hand and smiling as he talked to Victoria. We put on a perfect show of being a loving couple in front of the entire Hale family. When the pleasantries were almost over, Jasper spoke in a trembling voice. "Mom." Victoria looked at him coldly, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "That's right. You're not my son. Your grandmother swapped you with my real son when I gave birth, because she wanted you to have a better life. If my son hadn't been so successful, I'd still be cleaning up your messes." I noticed Lila look up in shock, her eyes wide with disbelief. I kept my face neutral as I listened, but I could feel Killian squeezing my hand so hard it hurt. Victoria looked down at Jasper, who was now sitting on the floor, and laughed coldly. "I thought about keeping you around, even after 20 years. If you'd just done what you were told and married Eleanor, I would have let you stay. But instead, you insisted on marrying an illegitimate whore, and then you went out and got another woman pregnant. You've disgraced the entire Hale family." Her voice turned icy. "So there's no reason for you to stay here anymore, Jasper." The servants standing behind Jasper saw the look in Victoria's eyes. They grabbed him by the arms and dragged him out of the house. Lila was pulled out right after him, and they were both thrown onto the street. I glanced at Victoria. Her face was completely calm. That's how it worked in high society, I thought. As long as you didn't hurt someone's bottom line, they'd look the other way. But if you crossed them, they'd destroy you without a second thought. Jasper had been kicked out so quickly because his scandals had badly damaged Hale Corporation's reputation, and that pregnant woman wasn't going to go away quietly. If the Hales gave in to her demands, they'd be setting a precedent. There would be more women showing up with Jasper's bastards, and it would ruin the company's future. Besides, with Killian and me now running things, Jasper and Lila were nothing but a joke. They had no value to the Hale family anymore. When Killian took over Hale Corporation, some of the board members were hesitant, but Killian convinced them in just a few sentences. He told them that if he became CEO, his fiancée would take over the company's struggling mid-range and high-end fashion brands. With my expertise, I could turn them around and make them profitable again. That was an offer the board couldn't refuse. When he saw they were wavering, Killian dropped the bombshell. If I become CEO, I will share all of Voss Enterprises patents with Hale Corporation for free, and I will merge Thorn Group into Hale Corporation, so we will be one company, sharing all profits and losses. That was it. The board voted unanimously to make Killian CEO. In just 2 weeks, the power transition was complete. Thorn Group was merged into Hale Corporation and became their Los Angeles division. By the time everything was finalized and the news was announced, the public had already moved on to the latest celebrity scandal. No one was talking about the Hale family drama anymore. My design team moved back from Los Angeles to New York with me. Our salaries were increased by 20, making us some of the highest paid designers in the entire Hale Corporation. No one dared to complain. I was Killian's right-hand woman now, and during the power transition, everyone was watching me closely to figure out what Killian was really thinking. But right now, I was sitting in Killian's office, facing him across his desk. He was looking at the piece of paper in front of Mimi's resignation letter. His smile didn't fade, but his eyes narrowed behind his gold-rimmed glasses. Ms. Voss, please tell me why you're resigning. I didn't say anything. I just unlocked my phone and held it up to him. The screen showed a news article about Voss Enterprises' impending bankruptcy. Killian nodded in understanding. I can help you buy them out. I held up a hand, cutting him off. If you help me buy Voss Enterprises, then who really owns it? You or me? Don't think that just because I played your fiancé for 6 months, I actually believe I'm the lady of the house. Killian looked away first. He picked up my resignation letter and read it carefully, then frowned. But what about your design team? Why are they all staying at Hale Corporation? I took a sip of tea from the cup on his desk. They've been with me through everything. I'm not going to ask them to risk their careers for this. Voss Enterprises is a black hole, and there's no need for them to get dragged into it. With you running Hale Corporation, they'll be safe and able to focus on their work. Killian laughed and shook his head. He didn't try to convince me again. He just signed my resignation letter. After I'd helped Killian take over Hale Corporation, he'd paid me a very large sum of money. Combined with the money I'd made from my European brand, I had more than enough to buy Voss Enterprises, but to get them to sell at a low price, I used Chloe's jewelry design company as the front for the acquisition. The Voss family, desperate for cash, sold us everything, all the shares, all the patents, all the technology for a fraction of what it was worth. But even after they got the money, I wasn't going to let them live happily ever after. As soon as Jasper was kicked out of the Hale mansion, Lila had broken off their engagement immediately. They'd never actually gotten married. After all, without money, Jasper's true colors came out. He started drinking in seedy bars and got addicted to gambling. He lost every last penny he had. A friend who'd introduced him to gambling lent him some money, telling him he could win it all back. But Jasper's luck didn't turn around. He lost everything and ended up owing a huge amount of money to loan sharks. Jasper was a coward. When the loan sharks held a knife to his throat, he immediately told them about Lila. He said she was his fiancée, and that she'd just sold her shares in Voss Enterprises and was now rich. The loan sharks went to Lila's house, but she refused to pay them. They went back to Jasper and beat him badly to get Lila to pay up. Jasper sent her a video. It was the same sex tape Lila had played at my engagement party. Lila was furious. She went to Jasper's rundown apartment to confront him. They got into a huge fight. and in a fit of rage, Jasper stabbed her in the stomach. He panicked and ran away, leaving Lila bleeding on the floor. She bled to death alone in that dirty apartment. By the time someone found her, her body had already started to decompose. When Lila's mother was called to identify the body, she had a complete mental breakdown. As she was being led out to the car, she collapsed on the sidewalk from a heart attack. She was dead within 5 minutes. A man who'd been standing nearby waited 5 minutes after she collapsed before walking over. He checked her pulse, then stood up and pretended to panic, screaming for someone to call an ambulance. I got the call that Theodore's mistress was dead while I was in my office looking at the sketches for my European brand's next collection. When the man on the phone confirmed she was gone, I let out a quiet breath. I looked at the photo frame on my kit. Was a picture of Theodore, his mistress, and Lila. I picked up a marker and blacked out the mistress's face. Now only my father was left, with Lila and his mistress dead. Theodore was now a lonely man with millions of dollars to his name. But he wasn't. Sato was relieved. No one was there to tell him what to do anymore. He could drink and gamble and sleep with whoever he wanted, whenever he wanted. He was living his best life, but I wasn't going to let him enjoy it. He was the reason for all my pain and suffering. He had to pay. One night, while Theodore was at a luxury club drinking and partying, a young woman sitting next to him slipped a white powder into his drink. I was sitting in the manager's office at the back of the club, watching. After Theodore left, the manager brought the young woman into my office. I looked up at her. She was barely 20 years old and smiled. "You did perfect. If you want your revenge, don't stop now. In 3 months, he'll be paralyzed in a hospital bed, completely helpless." The girl's hands clenched into fists at her sides. She nodded once, then turned and left. I watched her go inside softly. Years ago, Theodore had set his sights on her older sister. When she'd refused him, he'd destroyed her life until she'd killed herself. He'd gotten away with it because he was rich and powerful. Now it was time for an eye for an eye. It was only fair. The girl was beautiful, and with the designer clothes and jewelry I'd bought her, she was irresistible. Theodore was completely obsessed with her. He came to the club every single night just to see her. 3 months later, just as I'd predicted, Theodore collapsed outside the club. When he woke up in the hospital, I was sitting by his bed, smiling at him. He stared at me in terror. He tried to reach for the call button, but he couldn't move a single muscle. He was paralyzed. I ignored the look of terror on his face. I pulled out my phone and showed him a black and white photo of a young woman who looked almost identical to the girl he'd been seeing. "This is Luna Reed," I said softly. She was a senior at the New York Academy of Art, studying design. She interned at Voss Enterprises 3 years ago, and you tried to sexually harass her. When she fought back, you blacklisted her from the entire industry. She killed herself 6 months later from depression. I looked at his old, wrinkled face, and I could smell the sickly sweet smell of old age that clung to him, even through the expensive cologne he wore. I smiled. "Do you remember her now?" He tried to lunge at me, but he couldn't move. All he could do was make gurgling sounds of rage. The beautiful young woman from the club walked in and stood across from him. I handed her a debit card, right in front of Theodore. "This card has all of his liquid assets, about 20 million. Consider it compensation for your sister. He'll be stuck in this bed for the rest of his life. You can come visit him whenever you want." I looked at Theodore, a smirk on my face. "And don't worry, Stuff. He'll live a long time." I stood up and walked out of the room. As I closed the door behind me, I heard his screams of agony and the sound of something crashing to the floor. For the next 30 or 40 years, this man who'd spent his whole life hurting others would get to suffer for every single thing he'd done. 2 weeks later, the equity transfer was complete. I officially took control of Voss Enterprises through Chloe's jewelry company. I fired most of the old executives who'd been loyal to Theodore and replaced them with a young, talented management team. The few who remained were the ones who'd kept their heads down and just wanted to retire in a few years. I let them stay. Voss was an old brand, after all. As I went through the company's patents and archives, I found dozens of fabric recipes and techniques that I'd thought were lost forever. My grandfather had written them down after traveling the country and learning from master craftsmen. They were priceless. Just one page of his notes, one unique fabric, could inspire an entire clothing collection. But Lila had left all of it in a dusty storage room, forgotten and rotting. I carefully packed everything up and put it on the bookshelf in my study, where I could reach it easily. As I started to turn Voss Enterprises around, the design team I'd left at Hale Corporation all contacted me. They wanted to come work for me again. I went back to Hale Corporation to talk to Killian about it. I thought he'd be reluctant to let them go, but as soon as I told him what I wanted, he agreed immediately. He signed the paperwork right there and gave the entire team a huge severance package. Killian had been more than fair, so I didn't want to take advantage of him. I finished the sketches for the spring collection I'd been working on at Hale and gave them to him early. He was incredibly grateful. One of the young designers on my team, who'd only been working for 3 years, watched us talking and turned to the senior designer next to her. Ms. Voss and Mr. Thorne are perfect for each other. Why aren't they together? The senior designer tapped her on the head and whispered, "She's her own boss now. She doesn't need a man to be successful. Unlike you. All you think about is romance." The young designer pouted and turned away, ignoring him. With fresh blood and new leadership, Voss Enterprises design studio, which had been dormant for decades, came back to life. Our new collections started getting rave reviews from customers, and the brand's reputation was completely restored. The following spring, our new spring collection outsold even Killian's most popular brand. But my ambitions didn't stop there. My European design brand won the gold medal at the International Fashion Design Awards again. The standout piece was a gown made from a fabric inspired by ancient textile craft manuscript. Hand-sewn by master craftsmen using a complex, beautiful technique. The luxurious materials combined with the visionary design of an international designer took the fashion world by storm. I started recruiting young, talented designers from across the United States. And through my European brand, I helped them showcase their work to the world. In 5 years, in 10 years, Voss Enterprises and the designers we train will be known all over the globe. The future of Voss Enterprises and my future is brighter than ever.